The Last of Us has been my favorite game since its original release in 2013. This is because its story, combat, and world design all come together to build the most complete gaming experience I have ever had. Now, years after the original, a remake has been released, with all the updated visuals and facial capture of a modern-day Naughty Dog title. You couple these enhancements with what is still the two greatest performances in video game history from Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson, and this playthrough once again has solidified that The Last of Us is still my favorite game of all time. This is The Last of Us Part 1. Now, I know it's a strong statement to say The Last of Us is the greatest game ever made, but I believe video games are a piece of art and art is subjective, so this video is really just my opinion, which is one I truly believe. If you disagree, that's fine. I disagree with some of my own friends in real life about this game, but I hope that by the end of the video you understand why I love the game, even if you don't. And I really should start off with saying I don't think this remake should have been $70 on release. I was willing to pay that much because it's my favorite game, but this truly is just a visual upgrade, and it wasn't transformative in the way that Resident Evil 2 or Final Fantasy VII was. But this video is about the game itself and not PlayStation's business practices, so that's the last I will say about it. The storytelling in The Last of Us is what sets itself apart from other games, so I'm going to start there for a change. And to be clear, this is going to be a spoiler-free video. And yes, I know it's a remake of an old game, but new people are experiencing things for the first time every day. Plus, with the remake releasing, there could be even more people jumping in for the first time, so I'm going to avoid spoilers as much as possible. When I say the narrative is what sets this game apart, I don't necessarily mean it's the greatest written piece of literature ever. It follows a good rule that many writers seem to overlook, which is simple plot, complex characters. It's not a story like Game of Thrones, where we have 14 different characters and 6 different organizations, all with stories weaving in and out of each other. It's a story about 2 characters and their journey across the United States. Yes, there are other characters that come and go, but at the end of the day, this story is about Joel and Ellie, and the bond that they build across the game. This story wouldn't be anywhere near as impactful as it was if it wasn't for the amazing performances from Troy Baker as Joel and Ashley Johnson as Ellie. And this is where the enhanced facial animations come into play with Part 1. The level of fidelity in character models and the details of their facial capture is now on par with the quality of their voice work. It allowed me to get even more immersed in the cutscenes in a way that I truly wasn't expecting. And I think overall it makes the performances stand out even more. There were multiple scenes that made me feel deeply for the characters and their relationships in a way that few other games ever have.
Guess what? We're shitty people, Joel. It's been that way for a long time.
No, we are survivors.
This is our chance.
It is over, Tess! Now, we tried.
However, it isn't just highly scripted cutscenes that offer top-tier performances. The way characters banter back and forth during the quieter sections come across as some of the most human interactions to ever be in a video game. Talking between party members isn't anything new. BioWare had been doing that for years up to this point, but those conversations, while memorable, feel scripted. You could give me an audio clip of the optional conversations in this game, or just the little bits of dialogue they have commenting on the world around them, and I think without the context, it could almost come across just like 2 people having an unscripted conversation.
Hey, look. Gnomes.
Yeah, those are gnomes.
Man, I had an art book filled with these. I always thought they were super cute. Not fairies, though. They creep me out.
All right, man.
It's little details like the pauses or the inflections that Ellie has when she speaks that really sell it for me. These bits of dialogue are usually not important to the plot directly, but they are conversations about the state of the current world, or Ellie inquiring about how the world was before the fall. They are little bits of characterization that make Ellie and Joel feel human, and you can't help but fall in love with both the quirky, bright-eyed, optimistic Ellie and the distant, world-weary survivor that Joel is. And seeing Joel slowly warm up to Ellie's inquisitive nature is beautiful, and it helps reinforce what the story is about, which is the lengths you will go to protect what you love. I mentioned earlier about how important the quieter parts of the game are for the characterization of Joel and Ellie, but something else these quiet moments do is create what I believe is the most perfect pacing in any video game ever. With the game being a linear experience, Naughty Dog has a lot of control to how players experience their story. This is important because it lets them create the perfect mixture of quiet moments that evolve into shit hitting the fan. This never allows players to grow bored with what they're doing, whether it be walking around an environment and just taking everything in, or putting bullet holes in people's faces. Too much action can sometimes be a turnoff, just as much as too much boring downtime where you feel like you're just doing nothing. Naughty Dog hit the perfect blend that keeps you engaged as a player and invested in what's going on in a way that no other game has managed to achieve. It's perfect pacing that even Naughty Dog themselves couldn't replicate with their sequel. As I stated in the beginning, what makes this game special is the way that every single aspect of it perfectly synergizes together to create a perfect tone. From the performances to the environmental design, everything feels gritty, grimy, and dangerous, and the way combat contributes to this tone is perfect. None of the combat is overly flashy or stylish. It's quick, brutal, and effective. During fights, I was often scrambling trying to dig through my backpack to put together a Molotov or heal myself, all while trying to avoid enemies that were actively hunting me down. The enemy AI is aggressive and just smart enough that you never feel like you are in complete control of the situation. You always feel as if you're on the back foot and scraping by from the skin of your teeth, especially when playing on higher difficulties. Resources can dwindle fast with each encounter, and often the limited amount of ammo you can hold at a time forced me to utilize all my weapons instead of just relying on my revolver and shotgun. I often found myself using guns as a last resort, which of course made stealth my best friend. The shooting isn't perfect, and at many times I wondered if the shaky and occasionally imprecise reticle was me letting my nerves get the best of me and missing shots, or if the game isn't meant to be a precision-based third-person shooter. It didn't bother me too much, but I feel it's important to bring up so that I'm giving real criticism somewhere where the game doesn't excel. They added the gore mechanics from Part 2 this time around, and sometimes the way that heads just explode from a close-range shotgun blast really catches you off guard. It's intense in a way that makes you feel the weight of every life you take. Each kill matters, and it adds to the feeling that you're clawing your way to victory, death by death. The melee combat is just as brutal as shooting, as you use Joel's very barroom brawling style to beat enemies senseless. There's a bone-crunching satisfaction that leaves you cringing as you feel each blow landing against your enemy's head, always ending with a brutal finish as you slam your enemy's head against the edge of a table or a wall. And this brutality is exacerbated if you have a weapon like a pipe or a bat on you, as you're hearing your enemy's skull crack as you're swinging through them. When you feel like you're fighting on the backstep against the hunters, combat against infected feels like you are slammed to the bottom of the food chain. You have moments of legitimate horror when you feel like a fish in a shark tank. Surrounded by infected, you must carefully perform silent takedowns and distractions while trying to thin out the area. The sound design of the clickers is something that will always put a chill down my spine. And the updated models for the infected are now some of the grossest looking ever. The icing on the cake for me that pulls all these aspects of the combat together is the encounter design. You're never really facing hordes of enemies at a time. This makes the combat encounters feel more personal, and the areas you fight them in allows the kills to be up close. More mundane locations like a house turn into these intense but quick scenarios of cat and mouse where you're only fighting 5 or 6 guys at a time, but the enclosed nature of it makes it feel claustrophobic and dangerous. The enemy AI is a little better than the original, and enemies tend to move around more and rarely hunker down in one spot. They often try to push on your last seen location, which gives the opportunity to flank and outmaneuver them in satisfying ways. But you don't get any of the mechanics from Part 2 like going prone or dodging. Some people have a problem with this, but I don't. I think if you were to add these aspects to this game, then the second one wouldn't have anything that makes it feel special. You need to leave these extra mechanics in the sequel, that way it feels like an expanded version of the first. You have to have some sort of mechanical escalation in between titles. The world design is another marquee aspect of this game that no other studio has ever recreated. With the game being linear, it gives them the ability to make this game gorgeous, and is where you also see the budget for this remake going. A smart design choice in getting you to explore the environments is requiring players to scavenge for goods if they want to craft, which is a must if you want to survive combat encounters. It's a way for players to organically search every nook and cranny of an area, which often leads to finding interesting collectibles. Collectibles are a popular video game mechanic that often are used as padding to get players to spend more time in the world. Naughty Dog managed to make collectibles have some sort of narrative context that allows the world to tell stories separate of the main one in amazing ways. Coming across a diary written by a child at the time of the initial outbreak, talking about how he had to let his dog go in the woods because the military is making them leave. It's one example of a small story separate of the main narrative that caused me to put down my controller and pet my dog as he laid beside me, and I thought of how sad of an experience that would be for me in my own life. It's a smart way to fill your world with history and characters. That way the player doesn't feel like the main characters are the only ones in the world and there are events that are existing outside of what we are shown. Finding scrap and tools was also something that always excited me, if for no other reason than to hear that sweet, sweet sound design as I modded my weapons. The Last of Us is my favorite game because it showed me the heights that a video game narrative can reach, and how it can use its gameplay and world design to all build on each other and feed into one complete experience. While every aspect may not be perfect, there's nothing that the game ever does bad. I think it's the most complete and fulfilling play experience that I've ever had, and it has inspired me to work in the games industry, which is a dream I can thankfully say I'm currently living. I think it showed how impactful a video game story can be, and in that effort, it pushed the industry forward. It's a game that I believe everyone should try, even if they end up not liking it at all. But that's just my opinion. I'm curious what you guys think about The Last of Us. As someone who loves it, I love hearing all opinions, whether it be positive, negative, or somewhere in the middle. As always, guys, let me know what you think in the comments below, and thanks for watching.